Hey everyone, today's video is going to be a book review of The Character in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I always keep forgetting how to pronounce the author's name, so bear with me if I do mess up on the name. But I thought to kind of like talk about it because I did finish it recently and it was definitely an interesting read for the most part. Like, let's just get into this. I did write notes on this, so if you see me looking down, that'll be from me looking at my notes. Obviously, throughout the book, it's told from Holden's point of view throughout. It lasts over a few days, leading up to Christmas break, and it follows his trail of events that led him into the tuberculosis ward. Which I never really picked up at first until I was kind of like researching it and afterwards I'd read the book. But it does make sense anyway because I think it mentions at the beginning of the book where it was his psychiatrist that kind of like makes him write it from memory, so it is kind of interesting to kind of hear his recall of events that led him into that, that led him into the hospital situation, so there's that. He does talk about how he's always an outcast to society in terms of, you know, not wanting to be an adult but also wanting to be independent and all that jazz, and it's like something from like Holden's personality. He seems like an okay person. Well, I mean by okay is he seems like a decent person to get on with, but he has a lot of judgment of people, especially when it comes to like a lot of older people or his peers. For example, he always had slight comments about his peers, especially with the roommates that he was with at Pensy. Was it Pensy or Penny? One of the two. When he was at that school, kind of like talking slang about his roommates and just how he never really got on with them and stuff. He does try and fit in with society as well, because, you know, like society most days, they're always telling us you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to look like this, and, you know, everything like that. And he tries to fit into it, but it doesn't necessarily work out in his favour for a lot of the time. He doesn't feel like he fits into that mould, essentially. Bear in mind, this was written in the 1950s, but it was set in the 40s, so there's also a lot more stuff in reference to then than it would be now, because it's quite an old book by this point. And it's something that's actually quite interesting about Holden, the main character of the book, is that he can be quite a hypocrite throughout, in terms of, there's a moment in the book where he talks about hating the movies and hating, you know, watching films and stuff, but goes to it because he has nothing else to do. He watches the film in the end, which is annoying, to be fair. And I think there's maybe a couple other bits throughout as well where he says that he hates, you know, a particular thing or dislikes a particular thing, but yet he goes and does it. So, and also something that is quite annoying that Holden does as well is that he does, you know, ask really intrusive questions about people. Or when he is with people. So there was a scene where when he's in a taxi cab driving to the hotel that he stays the first 2 nights, and he gets a taxi there, and when he's in the taxi he's just asking really invasive, intrusive questions about the taxi driver. I think there was a moment in that scene where he asked the driver like to go and get cocktails or like drinks or whatever at a nearby bar, but obviously the taxi driver is working and just like tells him to leave and whatnot anyway, so that happens, and he doesn't really allow it to happen to him, which can be annoying. Like, why ask the intrusive questions but yet you won't let people do that to you, which does kind of show that he wants to get people to talk but he doesn't want to get himself to talk when he's asked the same questions. And kind of last point I do want to mention is that he is phony a lot of the time but misses the point, meaning that he doesn't really have a lot of interest. And there's a scene in the book where he sneaks back into his parents' home because he lives in the boarding school, and he sneaks back, he talks to his younger sister Phoebe, was it Phoebe? Yeah, it's Phoebe. And she asked him what does he like, but doesn't say anything because there's nothing that he genuinely likes. And yet he calls people out on that as well, but yet he's the type of person that kind of falls into that as well, which is somewhat interesting but odd in a way. It was definitely an interesting read for me because I knew the book and didn't really know much of the plot line or nothing about it up until I started reading it. And it was interesting just in terms of it being in his point of view and just trying to live the next few days before he's able to go back home and kind of be with his family. And it definitely does show how troubled he is in terms of, you know, he's flunked school apart from one class, which is English. Tries to fit into society but doesn't fit into the society at the same time. He calls out other people's phoniness but doesn't bother to recall his own. And just other stuff like that. It's interesting to kind of like read about his character and how he thinks as somebody who is a 16-year-old in the 1940s. And I think this would have been like a couple of years after the war, so in like between 1946 and 1950 at best. Within those few years, I'd imagine. And just kind of like how he's dealt with things in his own way and how he thinks and kind of does stuff as well and all that jazz. I would recommend this in terms of just how interesting it is and it being completely different to most modern day literature in terms of like, you know, recent releases and more contemporary books that are within the present day. Also, this was also written in the present day. Bear in mind, it was written in the 1950s and set in like the late 1940s. So it's set in present day, but set in 1950s present day. So it does kind of show you like the differences within living and tech and society and culture. It's different but enjoyable to say. And I definitely did enjoy it, and I would definitely be reading this again, and especially with a different lens on as well, because there's probably a whole load of other stuff I did miss when I first read this. So it will definitely be like an interesting reread as well to kind of pick up on other bits of other nuggets of culture and stuff that I definitely did miss the first time. So I don't have Goodreads. So if I did have Goodreads, I'd probably give it like a 3.5 to 4 stars out of 5, just in terms of it was an interesting read. There's probably like a bunch of stuff that I did miss, I did not understand the first time I read it, but definitely reading it the second time would definitely have a lot better. So there's that. I hope you guys enjoyed this little review on The Catcher in the Rye. If you want to read it, I definitely recommend it. It's definitely an interesting book to read. Also, if you did like this video, please like it. Please subscribe to this channel because it definitely means a lot. And I'll see you guys in the next video, depending on what that may be.